So we are in the last week of our series, which we've called You Are Welcome. We've been talking about hospitality, and not hotel management, right, or the way you know, the hospitality industry today, but the gritty, real, difficult, radical hospitality that we see time and time again offered and extended in the Scriptures, especially the radical hospitality that we see in the life of Jesus. And we believe that the Christian community should love and show the hospitality of Jesus. We believe that the Christian community should be a place where a radical welcome is extended to people who are hurting, to people who are on the margins, and a radical openness and welcomeness to people, the way Jesus welcomed people. People have so many thoughts about churches and Christians, and so many different ideas about what it means to be Christian in our world. And we believe fundamentally, though, that we should be showing the love and the welcome that Christ has shown us. That's been a verse we've come back to time and time again these last couple months, that to welcome one another as God in Christ has welcomed you. So today is going to be a little different structurally than we've used to if you've been around for the last months or so. We're finishing up a series, so I'm doing some summary stuff. So I'm just going to lay out the agenda right now for what's going to happen so everyone will be able to follow along. We're doing 5 things, so you can remember it on your hand, all right? We're going to show one video clip. There's going to be a video clip from the TV show MASH. Anybody grow up watching MASH, or anyone seen MASH in your life? All right. It's a good show. It hasn't been on in a while. But one scene from a clip, TV show MASH. Then I'm going to explain 2 scenes in the life of Jesus. We're going to talk a bit about the scenes that Karis just read. The women who come to the tomb to anoint Jesus with oil and to care for his body, and then the 2 men on the road to Emmaus. So that's what we're going to do second. Third, I'm going to share one summary point, one thing that I just hope stays with us and with you forever and ever. So that's right in the middle there, that one thing I want us to all remember and keep with us. And then fourth, I'm going to share a summary of the whole series. We'll fly through that. I actually wrote it out for you to take home, and we'll post it online so you can grab it and look back. But it's kind of a summary of all the different things we've seen about hospitality over the last 2 months or so. And then last, I'm going to leave us with a series of suggestions. Again, that you can take home with you. I have 10 or 11 kind of ideas. Like, all right, if we believe this stuff, if we're going to show the hospitality of Jesus, if we're going to reach out and love others, what are some of the ways that looks like? And those are my suggestions. I hope you have more, and you can take it home and we can keep discussing. Right? Okay, so that's what's happening. We got it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, first thing, we're going to watch this clip. Now, real quick, I want to give you some background on the TV show MASH. The basic premise of MASH, it was wildly popular. One of the last episode of MASH was one of the most watched TV events of, I believe, the early 80s. Okay, good, yes. Did you watch it live?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So MASH is this kind of comedy and also kind of drama about a group of field doctors during the Korean War. The main character is this kind of wisecracking doctor named Hawkeye Pierce, played by Alan Alda, if you've seen him in movies and things like that. He witnesses the horrors of war daily, and he simply tries his best to heal the wounded, and you follow his life and the life of some of the other doctors, and there's a priest as part of the story too. It's a great show. But he witnesses the horrors of war daily. He's in this terrible kind of situation. It's a difficult time. They're right in the middle of war, and these are these doctors who are regularly receiving wounded soldiers and all of that. In the scene we're going to watch, he's on this break. He's on an R&R break where he's kind of got some time off. And to set this clip up, he wanders off and he ends up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and an enemy, one of the North Korean soldiers, meets him, and he has him at gunpoint. And what happens in this episode is the soldier who's grabbed him at gunpoint, the enemy, has another soldier who's injured and wounded. And so he recognizes that Hawkeye is a doctor, so he forces him at gunpoint to come and help try to save the life of his friend, who is the enemy of Hawkeye, right? These are the guys you're fighting. And so he's kind of held at gunpoint, forced to show this hospitality. And he's in this kind of weird, hopeless, difficult situation where he's trying to figure out what to do, right? If he saves this, if he doesn't help this enemy, the enemy will just shoot him. If he helps the enemy the enemy might shoot him anyway. If he helps the enemy and saves the enemy's life, then there's more enemies fighting his side. So that's kind of the situation. And in this is kind of the climactic last scene of this episode. I wish I could show you all 4 episodes, or 4 scenes, but it would take too long. But I want to show you this. This is the last scene, and you'll see how it all plays out. Hold that scene in your head, all right? I want to share with you 2 more scenes from the Bible, specifically from the gospel, or the story of the good news about Jesus from the author Luke. Luke shares 2 scenes from the life of Jesus, his resurrection account, and this is what Karis read. There's a scene where a group of women spent 3 years putting their hope in someone. And that someone, this Jesus that they followed, has become kind of this ultimate disappointment. He has died. Jesus has died. And it is Sunday morning, and they don't know what to do. It's a scary time. His followers might be rounded up next. These are people that are known to follow this Jesus, this failed Messiah. So they don't know what to do next. They're kind of at a loss, kind of a tough place for them to have faith and hope. And what they decide to do, they decide to go to the tomb and take care of Jesus anyway. They decide to go and to anoint his body. They decide to go and to show him hospitality, to welcome him, to reach out, to love, and to care for him, even after it appears like all hope is lost and this Jesus has left him and let them down. So they decide to go and show him hospitality. They go and they care for their dead friend. And that day and in that scene, they're met by angels telling them the news of the resurrection. In their hopeless state, they learn that there is a hope beyond death. In their reaching out to love and to care anyway, they have a divine encounter where they hear the good news of the resurrection of this Jesus. In the next scene in the Gospel of Luke, there's 2 disappointed followers of Jesus. And they're on the road to a town called Emmaus. And while on the road, this 3rd traveler joins them. Which if you've read this story, you know it's Jesus, right? But they don't know that yet. So this 3rd traveler joins them to discuss the events that have taken place regarding this Jesus of Nazareth. And at the end of their conversation, the disciples, they pull off to go home. And they see that this 3rd traveler is going to keep going farther down the road. And they invite the 3rd man in for dinner. And if you've been following this series, hospitality has so much to do with meals. They meet this new person. They're in this loss. Like everything we thought we believed, it's all been shattered, it's all been hopeless. And then this 3rd guy comes along. He doesn't really know what's going on. So we're like, have you not heard what's happening in Nazareth? And but at the end, it's the end of the day, they're peeling off to go home for dinner. And they grab that 3rd person. They see him keep going like, no. Come in. Come have dinner with us. And they offer him hospitality, and they welcome that person in. And when they all sit down for the meal, this 3rd person, this traveler, this sojourner, breaks the bread at that house. And they realize it's this Jesus with new life, this resurrected Jesus. And they meet him in the breaking of the bread. And they are amazed. Here's what's happening in all 3 of these scenes. In all 3 scenes, there are people that are kind of lost. All 3 scenes, there are people that are in a place where they're low on hope, if they have any hope at all. In all 3 scenes, it's people that are having a hard time keeping faith, have a hard time believing in what they used to believe in, have a hard time having faith in a dark moment. It's all 3 scenes, it appears to be this place where God is silent or absent in some way. Right? This Jesus, who they placed so much faith and hope in, is gone, right? In the Luke accounts, both scenes start with people believing that Jesus is gone, that this hope, this mission, this religious thing they were so invested in is gone, and it failed. And in the scene in MASH, if you're paying attention closely, the one word on Hawkeye's lips when he realizes the soldier he's been working on might be dead, what does he say? He says God. And then he keeps working on him and he's dead. And all of these scenes, these are people wrestling with where is God in the midst of something difficult. Jesus, where are you, is their cry. we've had that cry. I think all of us at some point, in some moment, if we're honest, have cries like that. God, I know I'm supposed to believe, but can you help my unbelief in this moment? Or, God, I know I'm supposed to have all of the hope. I'm supposed to have all of the faith, but Lord, where are you now? They're in a place where it's hard to keep the faith. It's a place where it's hard to keep believing. Jesus, I know this has made sense in the past. I knew I grew up believing this. I had this for a while. I thought this was true. This all made sense for me. But now I'm struggling. Now I wonder where the hope is. Now I wonder where the faith is. We've experienced that. Or if you've experienced that, you are certainly not alone. And all of these people in these three stories are in this place where it's hard to keep the faith. A place where it's almost impossible to keep hope alive. And what do they do in each scene? They extend hospitality. They choose to love. When they struggle with faith and when they're struggling with hope, they choose to love. When their faith is low, when their hope is low, they keep loving. To extend hospitality to one another is simply to love, and to love in a radical and dangerous way. It's to love others as you would want them to love and care for you in your darkest hour. And each of these three groups of people do that. Each of these three groups of people, amidst difficult times, they don't know what to do, and they decide, I'm going to keep loving. I'm going to keep reaching out. The two men on the road to Emmaus, in their hopeless moment, they don't forget to love, right? They're sitting there. They don't know what to do. They've just talking to this new guy. They could easily say, like, all right, I know we're supposed to help this guy out. I know that's kind of the rules. You welcome people into your home. It's been a rough weekend for us. We thought everything we believed in has been lost and shattered. We're going to let that guy go on his way. We're going to go home, just relax, think about this. They don't. They say, no. Or no. You, listen, it's been an awful weekend. Stuff's going crazy in Israel. Everything's been a disaster. Come home. Come home with us. Come sit down. Come eat with us. Come, let's get some food together. They extend the hospitality to this man who they don't know, to this stranger. And in that, they meet God in some real, powerful, divine way. They meet the resurrected Jesus. The woman at the tomb Easter morning, they could have given up. It would have been very easy. That would have been the safe play, right? They didn't say, forget him, he failed us, he let us down. Why would I now stick my neck out for this Jesus? He isn't going to save us anymore. But they keep going, and they go to the tomb to care for the body, to care for the one they love, to extend that hospitality, to extend that love. Hawkeye in this scene, he has a moment where the enemy is vulnerable. The previous scene I wasn't able to show. Hawkeye starts working on this young soldier, this kid, and the other guy's got him at gunpoint, and he realizes that he needs to do this emergency tracheotomy, and he's trying to, there's a language barrier, so he's trying to yell to the enemy soldier, like, you need to help me, you need to hold him down. And Hawkeye at one point just takes the gun from him and throws it away and says, you need to help me to save this guy. But he has this moment where the enemy is vulnerable, right? The enemy is now helping him. And after the soldier dies, the doctor could have hopped up, Hawkeye could have hopped up and grabbed the gun and said, ha, you are my enemy. You point your gun at me. Now I'm going to point my gun at you. He doesn't do that. The enemy soldier, after the soldier dies, goes and grabs the gun. But he lets Hawkeye walk away. Hawkeye has another chance. He can just walk away and be done with the whole thing. Happy to escape with his life. Right? He could look at this and say, I got in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was weird, but I'm going to go back to normal. This man is my enemy. I tried to help him a little bit, so he's being nice to me and not killing me. Let's leave well enough alone. Let's go back to the normal thing. Just happy, right? But in the center of all that's awful in war, all the hopelessness, all the where is God in this, he turns around and he kneels down next to his enemy and he begins to help his enemy bury the enemy's friend, bury the soldier. You know what I hear in my mind, you know what I feel and experience when I watch this scene, when I've seen this scene in the past. What comes to mind are some of the most powerful words of Jesus I've ever heard. What comes to mind is this, when I watch this, and it's good to get the words of Jesus in your head because it'll start, if wherever you're at in faith, if you put some of the words of Jesus in your head, some of his teachings, it'll come back to you and hit you in really powerful ways. It's just powerful stuff. Wherever you're at, whatever you believe about God, the stuff Jesus says ends up hitting you and impacting you. But Jesus said this, "You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." I hear this too, and this is from the letter that Paul wrote to a church in Rome. I hear this when I see this scene. "While we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person someone might dare to die. But God shows his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more now that we are reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." I see this and I hear these words and I remember Jesus and his love. That I was his enemy and he loved me. And I think if I want to experience God, if I want to encounter God, even in times where there is little hope and in times where I have little faith, in these moments, if you want to experience God, even in times where you feel like there's little hope and little faith, the option we have is to take the risk and to keep loving. I think it is there, in times when we don't have hope, in times when we don't have faith, where we keep loving, that we experience God in real and powerful ways. In those places, in those moments, are places where Jesus becomes so real to us. And it's in those places and those times where we can recognize again just how much this Jesus has loved us. When we take the risk to extend hospitality to someone else, to love someone else and reach them in, we get to be reminded by a picture and get to be reminded of how much God has loved us, that he has first shown us hospitality, that he has first welcomed us in, that God as the creator created a world and welcomed us in and made this good world and called us to be made in his image. And as we're broken and fallen away and hurting and lost along the path, this God breaks in again and welcomes us back in, and then welcomes us back into his life, and welcomes us back into his new hope and his new creation. And that is so good. 1 Corinthians, Paul says this: "If I have all faith but don't have love, I am nothing." And this is in chapter 13, this famous passage on love that Brian spoke about a couple weeks ago. And the last verse in that chapter said, "Faith, hope, and love abide. But the greatest of these, the greatest path, the greatest way, the greatest road is love." The greatest way forward is love. The only way forward when you don't know what to do is love. We've been talking about this hospitality for 8 weeks. And one of the main reasons is because this extending hospitality, these scenes of how Jesus welcomes sinners, how Jesus goes and eats meals, how people show Jesus a welcome. We've been looking at all of these scenes because this hospitality is love in action. It puts teeth on love and moves it from something we kind of talk about up here and out in space and in the clouds and these feelings of love, and it puts it into action, right? Like, I love someone I don't know, and I'm going to show them that by welcoming them into my home. Or I love this person here who's broken and hurting, so I'm going to go to them and walk beside them and be next to them in their pain. Or I love my enemy in such a way that even when I don't have to, I'm going to walk back and help him bury his friend and be with him in his pain. Here's what I want you to know. This is 3. Here's what I want you to know and never forget from this whole series. Keep this in you. Bind this onto your heart. This. If you don't know what to do, if you don't know what to believe, if you don't know if you have any hope left, do this. Love like Jesus loved. Show hospitality like Jesus showed hospitality. If faith is low, if hope is low, choose to love people. Choose to welcome people even when it's hard to believe. Choose to love people. And I believe that that is where you will encounter and experience Jesus and the divine in powerful and amazing ways. If you are searching for God, try to reclaim some of that hope and that faith. If you're trying to reclaim some of that, then choose to love like Jesus and his community throughout the centuries has chosen to love. I see this over and over and over again in the Bible. People in desperate situations, people in dire hopes, showing that hospitality, showing and welcoming people in. And what we see in the scriptures over and over and over and over again is God showing up in real powerful ways. And I believe that still happens today in the regular ebb, flow, mundane, meals, being together, helping someone who's hurting, all of that regular stuff. As we extend the radical hospitality of Jesus, as we choose to love even from our weak places, that it is there that we encounter the presence and power and mercy and love and grace and goodness of God himself. That's what I want you to keep with you, no matter what. So that's 3. I got 2 more things. I'm going to fly through the last 2 things, okay? So we're going to do summary and suggestion. And you have those in your seats. So we've been talking about this for 8 weeks. I wanted to leave you with a summary because I want us to have this. And again, this will be online on Facebook, on our branch page and all of that. So a summary, and I'll try to fly through this for you. When people extend hospitality, a divine encounter often takes place. That's what I just kind of shared as my main point of the whole series. But beyond the life of Jesus in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see story after story where people are asking for hospitality, and there's stories of poor widows who welcome people in, and God provides for them and heals and all of those things. And there's a passage in Hebrews where it says, don't neglect to care for the sojourner or the stranger. And when you do that, you end up entertaining angels and all this beautiful stuff. All right, that was one. Another one of the key charges against Jesus was that he sought and received hospitality from known sinners. Jesus was a guy who was known for hanging out with sinners. That's kind of the way he was made fun of and mocked, was like, how could this guy be a great religious leader? Look at all the time he spends with sinners and tax collectors and all of those people. What he did was shocking and offensive to religious people in his day, the way he was eating with people who were just kind of shady, right? Jesus' love for sinners and foreigners and his suggestion that the Lord has a similar concern for those people greatly offended him, greatly offended people. We got to look at that one just powerful story. Jesus in his hometown gets up and talks in the synagogue at a worship service and suggests that God cared for some of the widows of their enemies in Israel back in the day, that God cared for some widows instead of the people that were God's people. It was pretty offensive stuff to people that day. He basically got up and said, God has loved the foreigners just as much or more than some of you. And their only response to that was to pick up stones and try to stone Jesus. But God has this heart for the foreigners, and there's this picture where it seems like Jesus loves the enemy just as much as he loves us, and he wanted to make that point. 4, Jesus, like the Lord, like the God that we see in the Old Testament scriptures, has a heart for the vulnerable in society. Next one, those who refuse to give hospitality are punished in the life to come. Jesus seems to talk about wrath and anger, and is just really, where you see anger and wrath in Jesus, it tends to come in scenes where people had the opportunity to show love and hospitality and care for the poor, the widows, the blind, the lame, and they don't. And it tends to be a wrath towards religious folks who should know better and should know about God and his love. And that happens time and time again, and you can look up all of those passages. The line of who can receive hospitality and who can't are greatly and radically expanded. Jesus has a much bigger, wider circle of who's welcomed in than the religious folks of his day. And if you keep reading the Bible after the Gospels, the book of Acts is that whole thing expanding. More and more people who wouldn't be allowed at the table, Roman centurions and eunuchs and Ethiopians that were part of like a different kingdom, all end up coming to see this God and believe in him. And really the broad category of Gentiles are now welcomed into God's expanding love. Next one, 7. Women play a prominent role in hospitality. We didn't get to hit on this more, and I wish we had in the last 2 months, but there's a lot of scenes where there's a religious guy who doesn't show Jesus hospitality and a woman who's seen as a particular sinner or kind of a mess in society, and that woman gets it. We see this in the woman at the well story. There's a woman who anoints Jesus' feet with oil. The first people at the tomb are the women who choose to keep loving while the men are hiding. So there's a lot of scenes there. Last couple for this one. The followers of Jesus are called upon to attempt a level of hospitality that is beyond their capacity. When you start following Jesus, when his friends start following Jesus, he just has them try to do stuff that they don't have the power to do, right? We looked at the feeding of the 5,000 story. He's just like, all right, you guys feed them. No, we're gonna love these people. We're gonna show them hospitality. And they're like, we have nothing. It's like, give me what you have, we'll figure it out. Jesus calls people following him to try stuff that they don't have the ability to do, which is pretty cool, because then you get to do stuff you didn't think you could do. The followers of Jesus should not expect reciprocal hospitality. He makes it clear that we should extend hospitality, we should love others, and not expect anything in return. He sends them out 2 by 2. Says, if you're not welcomed, don't worry about it. Your job is to extend and welcome others that you might not get welcomed back. That's the norm. And then he shows them that he dies and gets crucified for being Jesus. And then last, he establishes a communion meal as central to identifying and understanding his mission to bring forgiveness, salvation, the new covenant. We talked about that at length for a couple different sermons, that at even the core of the message of Jesus is this meal of bread and wine and this table where people are welcomed to. And even his Last Supper scene, everyone there is going to betray him, and they're welcome to that table. One of the people there is going to sell him over. The other 10 or 11 are going to run away and hide, and he washes their feet, and he sits down and welcomes them to the table. All right, so that was the fast summary. I'm going to leave us now with suggestions. And we'll be back next week. This isn't the end, but just the end of this series. Okay, here are some suggestions I've just kind of come up with from diving into this. I spent a lot of time researching this and all these things. So first, this isn't a guilt trip to you. I'm not saying you must do all of these tomorrow. I fail at everything I'm suggesting we try to do as a community. This is me and you and all of us walking together, figuring out how to love others, figuring out how to show hospitality, figuring out how to be a witness to God's grace and mercy and love, and just who God is in this world. So I'm sharing these. But I hope these are helpful. These probably will be a little challenging and offensive, and that's okay. The scriptures, unless you already know everything there is to know about God, every time you kind of encounter and put yourself under and listen to the stories of God in the scriptures, they should challenge how we live and call us to the good life we were made for. So if something in the Bible hits you and you're like, oh, that hurts, that's good. That's you growing and learning and being challenged. So, all right. So first one, and again, these are my suggestions. You come up with your own, and we can talk about them, and we can figure out how to follow God together. So one, I had come to the communion table as frequently as possible. Celebrate communion as if someone actually rose from the grave. So often in churches, communion's become this ritual or this thing you kind of do, and it's too somber at times for me personally. We should be celebrating that this person died for us, and that should bring us back to a heart that's broken. But then also that God loved us and came for us and came back for us. So it should be this celebration. Some suggestions there. Basically, I suggest that you try to remember communion as much as possible. I had friends in the Salvation Army world, and they don't have communion on Sunday the way most churches do, but in their families, every meal, they take a moment and remember Like they have bread and they say, all right, we're going to remember this God that we love and follow. He's the God of regular life, and we remember that he died for us and gave himself for us. Or some other suggestions I had in there were, maybe if we're a church that takes communion once a month, to expand it beyond like this formal communion that we usually do and actually have a fellowship meal. That's what the early church did that I thought was really a really cool thing. We're in a size now where we could do that, right? To sit down and have a meal together and take communion as part of that. So making it more a celebration feast. That was one idea and a place to welcome people in. All right, 2, seek to practice hospitality in some way in all the different aspects of your society, right? So are we welcoming and showing the love of Christ to our own family? Is there hospitality there? Do we feel like we're welcoming each other in? And then beyond that, are we doing that as a community? Are we getting in smaller groups or missional communities or all the what we call branch communities right now? And are we together figuring out how to care and love for one another? And then beyond that, are we a community that's figuring out how to love and welcome in the neighbors in our world, the neighbors in our society? Are we figuring out how to welcome in some of those enemies, like the coworkers that we're frustrated with, or people that used to be friends but there's broken relationships, and all the people around us? And then even further, are we figuring out or thinking about or praying about how we can extend God's love and hospitality throughout this world, knowing even that there's people on the margins of society that are so far away from us? How can we take a step or a stab in helping that, both locally and globally? Are we showing in our picture of Jesus' love and hospitality in kind of all the different aspects of our world and our life? All right. 3rd one, choose to stay with other people on vacation. That's a simple one. It sounds like weird. In the Bible, that's what they did, right? You stayed with your friends. They took you in. People took each other in. We live in this world where things are so nice for us, and we go to hotels, and we, do all these things. But something my wife and I have done, we end up staying with other people, but we've had both our roommates stay with us just about every year as they've gotten 3 or 4 kids. And it's chaos. We have 3 bedrooms, and there's 7 kids in our house. But you're welcoming someone in, you're caring for a family. Just an idea. If we want to get a picture of welcoming and loving people, go stay in someone else's house on vacation instead of being by yourself. Or go let someone come stay with you for their vacation instead of going and getting a hotel or going to a resort. 4th, to the extent possible, structure your home in a way that it can be a center for hospitality and welcoming others. I know that's impossible for some people. But there's I have a lot of friends or people that have done this, great things like that. If you have the resources to have a bedroom set up to take people in who need help for a week or something like that, or to make your house and home the place that other families can come. If you have a backyard, or I've had friends who put a skate ramp up, and they said, we're Christians, we're going to love our neighborhood, we're going to let all the kids come hang out in our backyard and love them and hang out with them and get to know them and care for them, and just creative ideas like that. 5, be intentional about caring for new folks at your regular worship service. Be prepared to receive any new folks and people who come and check this place out and things like that, kind of as a basic thing. Are we loving and helping the new people that show up? Are we taking them out for dinner? Are we getting to know them and their stories? 6, this is kind of a big one too that I'm not saying we can all do, but keeps coming back to me as I look at the hospitality in the Bible and things like that, is adopt and foster children or really support people in the area who do that. There's a lot of great Christian organizations around here who have taken on that goal of saying, all right, there's this God who loves the fatherless and the widow. Why shouldn't Christians be at the forefront of showing that to the world in a world where kids need parents? Can we be a people that have people that do that or support people who do that? 7 is just kind of a list of questions to measure if our hospitality is lining up with what we see with Jesus. Are we loving our enemies? How, right? Like, we should love our enemies. All right. How are you doing that in your life? Like, what's that look like? Are we partying with sinners? How and when? Do we love our neighbors and know them? How many hours a week do we spend at meals with others? How much time do we spend with people who are far away from God? Who are we serving and expecting nothing in return? Are we showing hospitality that might offend people or look dangerous in our world? Are we ever rejected for trying to love and receive others? If not, is it possible we aren't doing things right? And are we spending time in prayer, seeking and praying to have a renewed mind and softened heart so that we might have a hospitality like Jesus? All right, just last couple. Expect God to show up when we practice hospitality. We've said that over and over again, that this God shows up when we extend his love to others. We should be a people that expect God to show up when we choose to love. 9, in faith, attempt a level of hospitality that's greater than your own capacity. Let's be a church, let's be a people that seek to feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Not because we're unwise or make plans that we can't organize well, but because we believe that God wants us to do good in this world and that he can do more than we can ever hope for or imagine. 10 and 11, practice regular confession to God. Let's just be honest that we fail to love and fail to welcome others in, and come back to that and ask God to help us and equip us to love and serve and show hospitality like he did. And then last, like Jesus, be a people that go out and welcome others in. Perhaps one of the greatest things we see about Jesus' hospitality and his love that's so different from what you see in the Old Testament scriptures and even people of God there is that they might have loved their enemies and welcomed them in. Jesus is so excited about showing the hospitality of God that he's kind of going out and looking for people. So that ultimate goal of being a people that actually go out to welcome people in is kind of the ultimate goal of hospitality. That looks like Jesus's. All right. So that was my fly-through list. Just one last word. Thank you for listening to that and take it home, ruminate it. I gave you all that stuff, and it's different than how we usually do sermons, really because I wanted you to have it. And I know it's not clean, it's a little messy, but I want us to be able to take this and wrestle with it and mess with it and think about how we can follow God. So often we hear sermons, and if you grew up in the church, or you've been going to church for a while, you've gotten into that lull of you go to church, you hear a sermon. Maybe if you liked the sermon, you feel something, or you kind of remember you should do something, but then life kind of goes on, and you get into that rhythm. And at its best, maybe the pastor's inspiring you or something like that, but nothing really happens. I wanted to give us a bunch of concrete stuff to take home and to think about, and just say this, like, we've talked about this for 2 months. What's going to happen? How are we going to respond to this? We got to look at awesome stories from the Bible that are powerful and inspiring and good. Jesus feeding 5,000. Jesus challenging people about loving enemies. Jesus washing the feet of his enemies and serving people and loving people and welcoming people in, and people showing great hospitality to Jesus. And all of that. I say this especially to those of you who are committed Christians and committed to this church and committed to following God. What are concrete, real things we can do to live out and to show the love and hospitality of Jesus? So don't let these 2 months be a thing where like, oh yeah, that was a good series, or those were good talks, or whatever. But the Bible and Jesus, when he speaks, means to impact us and change us. So how is it going to impact and change you, what we worked on this summer? I'll leave that with you. I'm going to pray, and then we'll have another song or two and give some announcements. Father, we thank you for this day, for this moment, for each and every good moment you give us to be alive, to keep living, to keep growing, to keep moving. Lord, I thank you that you made us, that you love us, that you redeem us, that you reconcile us to you. Lord, I pray that all of us would know that, would come to see how good you are, and that would change us, and that would renew us. Lord, I pray for those of us who are struggling, who are hurting, who have this the week in, week out of things are busy, there's so much going on, I'm trying to keep this together and that together. Lord, I pray for all those who are struggling with having hope for tomorrow, struggling with keeping the faith of whatever's going on in their life and continuing to trust you. Lord, as a community, help us hold one another up. And Lord, as a community, help each and every one of us be a people that choose to love wherever we're at. Help us know and remember that that is always the option you've given us. And that in every moment, in every situation, you were the God who loves. And you formed us to be a people that in every moment, in every situation, can choose to love and extend your welcome and your grace. And we know that that will look so many different ways. It might look like confronting each other. It might look like taking people in. It might look like going out to serve alongside someone. It might look like helping dig a hole next to a friend or next to an enemy. Give us wisdom, discernment, direction. Help us figure out how to love like you've loved us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.